The body lay across the front steps as though it had been dragged there deliberately. Clara and her father stared down at it in silence, neither one moving for a long time. The goat's throat had been ripped out, its head gone entirely. Its belly was hollowed, ribs jutting through, skin matted with drying blood that glistened black in the dawn. It was the third animal in as many weeks. Clara's chest tightened as she looked down at the corpse. She was 13, all skinny arms and sharp elbows, her sun-streaked hair hanging limp over her shoulders. If she had grown up somewhere else, maybe in town, people might have called her pretty. But the farm had chiseled away its softness, leaving her face set and unwavering, her eyes flat as slate. Those eyes gray with an almost bluish tinge made the few neighbors who'd seen them shift uncomfortably, as though she were reading their private thoughts without permission. Her father, Samuel, finally exhaled. He was a man of few words, but not unkind. His gaze was different from hers, golden brown and alive, like fire in a hearth. He turned to her and gave a small nod, and that was enough. Together they lifted the goat's remains, dragging it away from the porch. It wasn't heavy, not anymore, with the head missing and the insides torn out. The animal seemed more like an empty sack than a living creature that had once bleated in their fields. They carried it across the back pasture to a shallow pit dug weeks ago. It had become a place for burning. Every body ended up there now. As the flames consumed the goat, smoke curled up into the dark sky. Neither of them spoke. The ritual had grown into something wordless, almost sacred. Whether they burned the animals to keep scavengers away or to keep something else at bay, neither would admit aloud. Still, both carried the secret thought that maybe, just maybe, fire could ward off whatever cursed their land. From the kitchen window, Martha stood watching. Her figure was stiff and unmoving, her face pale in the glass. She didn't come outside for this. She didn't like the woods. She didn't like the slaughter. Her hands stayed busy inside with laundry and dishes, as if ignoring the truth could make it less real. Clara didn't expect comfort from her mother. She had never really known it. She had grown up more like a worker than a daughter, taking care of herself, tending animals, mending fences, dragging feed sacks through mud. Martha kept her distance, folding herself into the house as though the walls could protect her. Samuel had taught Clara how to kill and dress the livestock, and Clara had learned quickly. She didn't flinch when blood spilled. That night, after the flames had burned down to ash, Clara lay awake listening to the sounds of the farmhouse settling. Wind whispered against the siding. A loose shutter banged somewhere in the dark. She closed her eyes and drifted into uneasy sleep. The dream came suddenly. She was in the woods, but they were larger, denser, thicker than she had ever known. Branches clawed at her arms. The ground swallowed her steps. There was no path, no way through, only endless trees blotting out the light. Every sound made her freeze. The forest reeked of burning flesh, acrid and heavy. Something stalked her, unseen but near. Then pain tore through her legs. Her bones cracked and splintered as though they were trying to escape her skin. She screamed, collapsing, clutching her knees as they bent backward at grotesque angles. Her arms throbbed. The marrow inside felt as if it were being sucked out, leaving the bones hollow and brittle. She could hear her body creaking like a bundle of dry twigs snapping underfoot. She clawed at the ground, her nails tearing until blood welled beneath them. And then she saw it, sharp black talons pushing through her nail beds, splitting her fingertips open. The agony burned like fire racing through her veins. She wished for death. She prayed the forest would swallow her whole. And then, silence. Everything went black. A voice whispered out of the void, harsh and broken, coughing between words. Killing harvest. Harvest for the blood moon child. Clara bolted upright in bed, her throat raw from silent screams. Her face was wet with tears. Her hair stuck to her skin. For a crazed moment, she looked at her hands, half expecting to see talons instead of fingers. But they were normal, pink and trembling in the moonlight. She turned toward the window. The moon hung there, half full, its pale glow spilling across the room. Her heart thudded in her chest. Slowly she looked down at herself and froze. The sheets beneath her were stained dark. Her underwear was soaked through blood. Her stomach knotted. But she didn't cry. She had been waiting for this. Half dreading it. Half expecting it. Samuel would never speak of such things. And Martha would only grow nervous, muttering about change. Change always upset her. Clara got up quietly. She cleaned herself with cold water from the basin, scrubbing her underwear until her knuckles burned. She stuffed crumpled tissue inside as a makeshift shield and rolled the sheets to hide them. Then she sat back on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the window again. The moon hadn't moved. It still looked down on her, silent and pitiless. For the first time, Clara felt that the world outside was not simply cruel, but watching her, waiting for her to step into whatever fate it had already written. The morning broke gray and heavy with clouds pressing low across the fields. Clara rose before either of her parents stirred, slipping on her worn work boots and pulling a knapsack across her shoulder. On the kitchen table lay a folded scrap of paper in her mother's precise, nervous handwriting, a list of soap, flour, and lye. Beside it sat a few crumpled bills. Clara tucked both into her bag. She hadn't told Martha about the blood. She never would. Not if she could help it. Her mother's anxious glances had taught her that certain truths only caused more silence, more walls built between them. Clara was used to keeping things to herself. The dirt road leading from the farm was slick with last night's rain, and she kept her head down as she walked, kicking at stones. The world smelled of wet soil and decaying leaves. Halfway to the main road, she stopped short. A bloody clump lay in the middle of the path. It was fur-thick, black, and matted, soaked through with blood. At first she thought it was some unrecognizable pile of brush. But then her stomach turned. Teeth jutted from what little remained of the skull. A single pointed ear clung stubbornly to the mass. It Wazer had been a cat. Clara crouched, her chest tightening. She didn't know this cat, but its nearness to their farm made her uneasy. It felt deliberate, as though someone or something was leaving these grotesque offerings for them to find. She thought of her father's late-night mutterings by the fire, his theories about the world's cruelty. He wasn't the kind of man who reassured a child about monsters hiding in closets. He was the kind who told her to keep a knife beneath her pillow, shoving the image of the ruined cat from her mind. Clara straightened and pressed forward. By the time she reached town, she felt almost dizzy from the shift in scenery. Bright signs painted in cheerful colors hung above storefronts. A movie theater displayed posters of wide-eyed dogs that talked and sang. The small playground in the park rang with squeals of laughter. Clara slowed, watching it all like a visitor from another planet. None of it made sense to her. She didn't think about playing. She thought about crops, soil, the quick slice of a blade against an animal's throat. Inside the general store, she gathered the items on Martha's list, tucking them into a brown paper sack. Her eyes lingered on a row of feminine products near the back aisle. But she turned away quickly. She wasn't ready to ask questions. Not yet. The tissue trick would do until she couldn't manage it anymore. She was nearly out the door when she collided with someone. The boy who caught her eye looked familiar. Pale skin, soft frame, small eyes darting nervously as he spoke. Clara recognized him from long ago Sundays when Martha had dragged her to church. His family owned one of the big white houses along Main Street, the kind with porches that wrapped around like arms. "Hey," he said with a grin that seemed too wide for his face. "You hear about all the dead animals?" Clara said nothing. "I said," he repeated, leaning closer. "Have you heard about all those killings? My daddy thinks it's a wolf or a bear, but Ma says it's the devil himself, come to take his harvest." Her stomach tightened. "Harvest?" she asked flatly. "Yeah," he said, clearly relishing the word. "Punishment. Reaping us for our sins. You know how it goes. And you know what we are, don't you?" Clara locked eyes with him, her gray gaze unblinking. "What are we?" "Humans," he said, smirking. "Full of sin. Full of lust. Especially girls. My mama says girls like you are the worst. Trashy little things who tempt men into wickedness." He let his eyes slide down her chest, lingering. Clara stiffened. "You feel that yet?" he asked, voice dropping low. "Turning into a woman? But I can smell it on you." She didn't move. He chuckled, emboldened. My friend says farm girls like you don't even wait for boys. Says you get lonely and, well, take care of business with the animals. He burst out laughing at his own joke, as though he had delivered something clever and sharp. Clara's head filled with a low buzzing, like a swarm of bees rattling against her skull. Heat crawled across her skin. Slowly, she set her paper sack down on the sidewalk. Her fingers curled into claws. Before the boy could register what was happening, her hand lashed out. Nails raked across his cheek with the precision of a hawk's strike. He shrieked, stumbling backward, clutching his bleeding face. What the hell? He tripped over the curb, tumbling onto the street with a grunt. Clara followed, calm and silent. She stepped over him, straddling his body, and drove her boot down hard between his legs. The scream that ripped from him was high and thin, almost infantile. He writhed, clutching at himself, tears spilling down his cheeks. You bitch. Clara crouched low, her face inches from his. Her eyes were cold, her voice steady. We don't lie with animals, she said. We slaughter them. He whimpered. Her hand slid to her boot. She drew out a small hunting knife, the blade flashing in the afternoon light. Do you know how to use a knife? She asked him. He shook his head, lips trembling. Well, I do. She dragged the edge through the air, tracing a line across his throat, then another down his stomach. 2 cuts. That's all it would take. The boy squeezed his eyes shut. A dark stain spread across his pants, the smell sharp and unmistakable. Clara stood, tucking the knife back into her boot. She retrieved her groceries from the sidewalk. When she glanced up, several townspeople stood frozen on the store stoops, staring at her as if they had just witnessed something inhuman. Clara met their eyes without shame, then turned and walked back the way she had come, her bag swinging at her side. That night, sleep did not come easy. When it finally did, it brought another dream. She was standing in her bedroom, pale moonlight silvering the floorboards. A scratching noise began in the walls, faint at first, then growing louder, more frantic. From under her bed came a low mew, a sound like a cat in pain. But the sound shifted, climbing higher, sharper, until it was a hawk's screech. It filled her skull, echoing inside her bones. She clamped her hands over her ears, but the sound grew worse, splitting her head. Clara pressed her back against the windowsill, her breath quickening. Then she heard it crying outside. Human crying. Her eyes flew open. She was awake. The cool night air slipped through the open window, and down in the yard, she saw her father. Samuel stumbled across the grass toward the pigsty, his shoulders heaving. He was crying, gagging, whispering to himself. Clara's chest tightened. She crept into the hallway, passing her parents' room. The door was cracked, and through it she saw her mother standing rigid at the window in her nightgown. Her skin was white as bone, her eyes hollow. Then Martha turned, looking straight at her daughter. For a moment Clara thought she wasn't human at all, but some mannequin propped in place. Then the figure moved. Slowly, pitifully. She shut the door without a word, dragging a chair across the floor to wedge it beneath the handle. Clara stepped back, heart pounding. She didn't go back to her room. She couldn't. Instead, she pushed through the screen door, barefoot in the wet grass, following the sounds of the pigs as they squealed into the night. The night was heavy, the sky swollen with clouds that let the moon through in broken shafts. Clara's feet sank into the damp grass as she crept toward the pigsty. The air was thick with the smell of manure and something sharper, a metallic tang that made her throat tighten. The pigs were restless. They shoved and pushed against the wooden slats, squealing, trying desperately to get away from something at the center of the pen. Clara stopped a few yards back, her arms trembling at her sides. A scream ripped through the air high, piercing, horribly human. Clara's body locked in place, her knees threatening to buckle. She forced herself to step closer, gripping the rough edge of the fence. In the middle of the pen knelt Samuel. But he wasn't Samuel anymore. His frame was twisted, swollen with unnatural muscle. His shoulders bulged, his arms long and knotted, fingers hooked into claw-like curves. His mouth stretched too wide, his teeth glinting wet under the moonlight. His nose was gone, flattened, his face elongated into something almost canine. The man she knew was buried somewhere deep inside, smothered beneath this monstrous shape. Samuel lifted half a pig in one clawed hand. The animal was still twitching, blood spurting down his forearm. He bit into it with a guttural snarl, tearing flesh like paper. Black-red gore smeared across his jaw. Clara's stomach heaved, but no sound escaped her throat. She pressed a hand against her mouth to keep from screaming. Then his head jerked back. He howled a raw, agonized cry that split the night. The pigs fell silent, their terrified eyes rolling. Clara felt the sound shiver down her bones, as if the howl itself were reaching inside her, trying to drag something out. She stumbled backward. The boards of the fence bit into her palm. She wanted to run, but her legs barely responded. Her gaze snapped to the farmhouse. In the upstairs window stood her mother, her nightgown glowing faint in the moonlight. Martha didn't move, didn't flinch. Her pale face watched the scene below with eyes too wide, too knowing. She looked almost spectral, like a ghost sewn into the frame of the house. Clara turned back just in time to see the beast's eyes meet hers. They were not Samuel's eyes anymore, where warmth had once lived. Now black hollows stared back, with faint sickly yellow light glowing far down tunnels that seemed endless. He froze when he saw her, his hulking body jerking as though seized by an unseen force. For one suspended moment, he looked not like a predator but like prey, stiff, trembling, measuring her. Then he moved. With startling speed, he lunged toward the fence, his claws scraping wood as pigs scattered and screamed. Clara cried out, finally, and stumbled back. Her bare feet slipped on the wet grass, but somehow she forced herself upright. She turned and ran. Branches tore at her arms as she darted into the tree-line, panic propelling her. Every snap of a twig behind her sent jolts of fire through her chest. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her throat raw. All she could think was get to the road, get to town, get away. But the woods weren't letting her out. The bramble scratched deep lines across her cheeks. Roots clawed at her ankles. The forest seemed to close in, each tree pressing tighter, each shadow longer. Clara's lungs burned. She pushed until she broke through into a clearing, squinting against sudden moonlight. At first, she thought the ground was just uneven, heaped with dirt. But as she stumbled closer, she realized it wasn't dirt at all. It was bodies. A mountain of carcasses rose before her. Deer, dogs, goats, cows all piled high, their eyes glassy, their mouths slack. Fur matted with blood glistened in the silver light. The stench rolled over her, thick and suffocating. She gagged, covering her mouth, but couldn't look away. There had to be hundreds. Her vision swam. She took a step back, and that was when something slammed into her, driving her to the ground. The impact knocked the air from her lungs, leaving her choking, clawing at the dirt for breath. A face loomed above her, pale and twisted with rage. It was the boy from town. Blood streaked his cheek where she had clawed him, but the cut hadn't dulled his sneer. His small eyes blazed with fury. Got you, dumb bitch. He spat, the words spraying her face. Clara writhed beneath him, but his weight pressed her down. Two more shapes stepped out from the tree's other boys, smirking, eager. One carried a bat, the other a length of rope. The boy straddling her shoved her arms into the dirt. You're gonna be nice now, right? You're gonna apologize. My friends and me. We'll teach you how. His grin stretched cruel, manic. Her stomach lurched with revulsion. She snapped her head upward, driving her forehead into his nose. Bone cracked. Blood gushed into her mouth, metallic and hot. She gagged, spit, and the boy screamed, clutching his face. Hold her, he roared, his voice muffled by blood. The others moved in, grabbing her arms, binding them with the rope. She kicked and twisted, but they pinned her down with ease. You and your freak family, the boy snarled, wiping his face on his sleeve. I knew you were evil. I'll get a medal for stopping you. His voice cracked, and Clara saw a flicker of fear behind his rage. Still, he leaned close, licking blood from the corner of his mouth. But first, we're gonna have some fun. He lowered his face to hers, dragging his tongue along her cheek. Clara spat blood back into his eyes. He roared, blinded, shoving both hands around her throat. His grip was crushing, cutting off her air. Clara's vision blurred. The other boys laughed, one of them howling like a wolf. Their mockery echoed hollow in the dark woods, absurd against the backdrop of real monsters. The boys squeezed tighter. Clara's body thrashed weakly, then began to fade. The world dimmed at the edges. She could hear her pulse hammering like a drum, then faltering, and then a whizzing sound, a heavy thud. The boy's grip slackened. His eyes rolled, and his head was gone. Blood sprayed across Clara's chest as his body slumped, collapsing beside her. She gasped in a lungful of air, coughing, gagging, desperate for oxygen. The other two boys screamed in terror, scrambling back. Clara rolled onto her side, dazed, and saw the shadow looming above her. Her father, or what was left of him. The beast crouched there, chest heaving, gore dripping from his jaw. His clawed hand reached down, snatching up the rolling head. Without pause, he hurled it into the mound of animal carcasses. Then, with a guttural roar, he bounded off after the fleeing boys, crashing into the trees with terrifying speed. Clara could only lie there, gasping, staring into the woods that had swallowed them. Her chest rose and fell in frantic bursts. Her hands trembled where the rope cut into her wrists. And then she saw them. Across the clearing, lining the tree line, figures stood in silence. Dozens, maybe more. Some held torches. The flames flickered across their faces. Half hidden, watching, they stretched in a long line, all the way back to the road. Her stomach turned cold. They weren't here to save her. They weren't here for her at all. They were here to witness. As she stared, the figures began to retreat. Slowly, deliberately, they backed into the shadows, torches dimming until the woods swallowed them whole. Clara's strength gave out. Darkness closed in. Clara's first breath was a ragged gasp, as though she had been drowning and finally clawed her way back to the surface. Cold morning air filled her chest, sharp and stinging. She sat up too quickly, her head spinning, the world tilting on its axis. The rope around her wrists was gone. Her arms were free, though raw where the fibers had bitten into her skin. She blinked, trying to focus, trying to make sense of where she was. The clearing was quiet now. The birds hadn't yet returned. Even the wind seemed to have hushed. Her eyes moved to the mound of carcasses. Atop the pile, 3 new trophies had been added, 3 boys' heads, lined in a neat row, mouths frozen in screams. Their lifeless eyes stared into nothing, skin pale against the gore that clung to their hair and necks. Clara's stomach lurched. She turned aside and retched until bile burned her throat. When she finally looked up again, she saw him. Samuel crouched at the edge of the clearing, perched like some grotesque gargoyle. Blood slicked his skin and clothes. His monstrous form seemed to ripple in the first hints of daylight, as if the shadows themselves had woven him into shape. His breathing was ragged, his chest rising and falling in shuddering gasps. But his eyes were his again, golden brown, warm, human. He looked afraid. Clara crawled toward him on shaky limbs, ignoring the stink of rot all around her. Her small arms wrapped around his thick neck, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she held him. His body was trembling, and his claws now. His hands hesitated before closing around her. He hugged her back with surprising gentleness. Over his shoulder, Clara's gaze lifted, and her blood ran cold. The tree line was ringed with more carcasses. Deer, dogs, cattle, creatures she couldn't even name, all torn apart and left in a grotesque circle where the townspeople had stood. Their offerings, their part in the ritual, an entire year's worth of sacrifices, piled and waiting. It hadn't just been her father. It had been all of them. Clara pressed her face into Samuel's chest, clinging tighter. She could feel his shame, his fear, the silent plea that she would understand. He rose slowly, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She let him carry her, too weak to walk, too broken to resist. The path back through the woods felt endless. But when the farmhouse came into view, bathed in the pale light of dawn, Clara's chest ached with something like relief. Samuel carried her inside, past the kitchen, up the creaking stairs, and into her room. He laid her down gently on the bed, her head lolled back on the pillow. She forced her eyes open, needing answers. "Those boys," she whispered. Samuel's jaw tightened. He lowered himself onto the edge of the bed, his hands clasped. "They won't be missed," he said softly. His voice was cracked, weary. Their parents should have taught them the rules. Clara shivered. Rules? He looked at her then, his golden eyes heavy with a sorrow she didn't fully understand. "You're a woman now. It's time your mother and I tell you. It's time you know what you are." The words hung in the air like smoke. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Her mind reeled with images, the goat carcasses, the cat, the piles of slaughtered animals, the townspeople lined in silence, her father's monstrous body tearing through flesh. All of it connected, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. Her body sagged back against the mattress. Exhaustion pulled at her, heavier than fear, heavier than grief. Her eyelids drooped. She felt Samuel's rough hand brush damp hair from her forehead, and then sleep claimed her. When Clara woke, the sun was high, flooding her room with warmth. For a moment she thought she had dreamed it all, the clearing, the pile of bodies, the line of silent watchers. But then the memory came crashing back, vivid and undeniable. Downstairs she heard the creak of a chair, her mother's hushed voice. Clara slid from the bed, her legs trembling beneath her, and moved slowly to the top of the staircase. Through the slats of the banister she saw them. Samuel sat at the table, his back bent, his hands folded as though in prayer. Martha stood at the sink, staring out the window with hollow eyes. Her voice was calm, eerily so. "It's done," Martha said. "The town will keep their silence. They always do." Samuel rubbed his face with both hands. Clara saw too much. "She had to," Martha replied. "She's of age now. It's begun." Clara's heart hammered. Her fingers dug into the railing until the wood bit her skin. She didn't want to hear more. She didn't want to know. And yet, she did. Because the truth was no longer waiting at the edges of her world. It was here, in the center, shaping her life whether she accepted it or not. That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling. The house was silent but for the occasional groan of wood. Outside, the moon rose fat and red, painting her walls in a bloody glow. Her father's words echoed inside her. "It's time you know what you are." The thought chilled her and, strangely, steadied her at the same time. She didn't feel like a victim. She felt like she was being initiated. And deep in her chest, though she tried to deny it, something stirred a thrum of power, an inheritance of blood. Clara didn't remember falling asleep, but she woke to the weight of silence pressing against her chest. The air smelled faintly of smoke, as though the embers of the burned carcasses still clung to the breeze. She moved carefully down the stairs. Her parents sat together at the kitchen table, facing each other with unreadable expressions. Samuel's eyes lifted to hers, and for a long moment no one spoke. Then he pushed his chair back and gestured for her to sit. "Clara," he began, his voice low and steady, "you've seen what I am." Her throat tightened. She nodded. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped together. "This isn't sickness. It isn't madness. It's a calling. Our family has carried it for generations. Every blood moon, the hunger comes. And the town, they know. They've always known." Martha's eyes glistened, but her voice was flat. "They feed it. They offer their livestock. Sometimes more. They watch to make sure the pact is kept. That's why they never interfere." Clara's mind reeled. "The pact?" Samuel nodded slowly. "The harvest. Once a year, the blood moon rises. And we take. It's what keeps this place alive. Without it, the town withers. Crops fail. Illness spreads. The harvest is the price." Clara's stomach twisted, but she couldn't look away. "And me?" she whispered. "You're part of it now?" Her mother said. Her voice cracked, a tremor slipping through. It begins when the blood comes. That dream you had, it wasn't just a dream. It was the start. Clara thought of the voice in the dark woods, rasping out its terrible promise, harvest for the blood moon child. Her hands curled into fists in her lap. So I'm cursed. Samuel's gaze softened, though his face was still lined with grief. Not cursed. Chosen. You'll learn to control it. As I did. The pain will come, but so will the strength. You'll carry the duty that belongs to us. Martha turned away, her shoulders tight. It's no gift, she muttered. The room fell quiet again. Clara's breath came slow and steady, though her mind churned. She thought of the 3 boys in the clearing, their heads lined like offerings. She thought of the townspeople in the shadows, standing still, torches in hand, complicit. She thought of the farm animals, slaughtered year after year, bodies burning in pits behind their home. It was all one machine, turning and grinding, fueled by blood. Finally, she met her father's eyes. And if I don't accept it? Samuel's mouth tightened. Then it consumes you. It destroys you from the inside out. There's no running from it. Believe me, I tried once. It nearly killed us all. Clara swallowed hard. A bitter laugh rose in her throat, but died before it reached her lips. She was 13 years old, and already the weight of something ancient pressed down on her shoulders. But in that moment, a strange calm settled over her. She understood what the others in town had never dared to say aloud. She wasn't like them. She never had been. The flatness in her eyes, the cold steadiness in her hands, the way she had felt nothing when striking the boy, it was all part of the same truth. She wasn't cursed. She was becoming. Days passed. The town stayed quiet. No one came asking about the boys. No one knocked on their door. Life moved as though nothing had happened. But Clara noticed the way people looked at her now when she went into town sharp. Fearful and careful. They knew she had crossed a threshold. At night, she lay awake, listening to the woods. Sometimes she thought she heard voices carried on the wind, whispers curling through the trees. Sometimes she dreamed of talons breaking through her skin, of her bones hollowing into fragile bird bones. Her body remade, and each time she woke, she felt less afraid. Her mother barely spoke, her face pale and haunted. Samuel grew quieter, though he watched Clara with something between sorrow and pride. The harvest season ended. Winter crept in, but the memory of that night hung over them like a shroud. Months later, when the first buds of spring pushed through thawing soil, Clara sat on the porch steps alone. Her hands rested in her lap. Steady. She looked out at the fields stretching wide, the woods dark at the edges. She knew another blood moon would come. She knew the hunger would return. She knew she was bound to it, whether she welcomed it or not. And strangely, she felt ready. The world had shown her its cruelty early. The town had mocked her, shamed her, tried to break her. But she hadn't broken. She had stood over them, knife in hand, unafraid. She had faced the truth of her father's monstrous form and had embraced him still. Now it was her turn to learn, her turn to claim the harvest. That night, as she lay in bed, she whispered into the dark, "I'm not cursed." The words felt like fire in her throat. They felt like a vow. She closed her eyes, and in the silence of the farmhouse, she thought she heard something answer back. Not words, but approval. A promise.